July 10th, 1866, near Charleston, South Carolina. The Rowland estate burned long after midnight. 11 men lay dead or dying, and the house that once echoed with commands now smoldered in a hush. It was not a revolt. There were no chants, no swords, no screams of war. It was quieter than that. A woman named Hannah Green, born in chains, 26 years old, lips stitched with silence, had decided to end a bloodline. Edgar Rowland, her master since birth, had made her a promise. Spring would bring her freedom, he'd said. The papers were almost ready, he'd said. A lie dressed in velvet. She waited through winter, waited through planting, waited through the bleeding of her own body, until she no longer waited. She calculated. Hannah bore no visible scars, not on her arms, not across her back, but every bone in her body was wrapped in memory. The estate was quiet that week, the summer thick and swollen with heat. Mosquitoes whined in the rice fields. Cypress trees leaned low as if in mourning. And Hannah, the quiet one, moved like steam, invisible, rising everywhere. She crushed jimsonweed seeds between 2 stones behind the smokehouse. The scent was bitter, earthy, almost sweet. She had learned from watching animals die. Cats convulsing, possums stilling too soon. She ground oleander sap into rice wine tincture, boiled the mixture down, strained it, and hid it where no overseer would dare search. Inside her own body, stitched into the hollow comb of her hair, laced beneath her skin. The first comb she used for her own hair. The second was slipped beneath the bed frame in Edgar Rowland's quarters, polished with that would absorb the oil. She left traces on doorknobs, smeared it beneath linen sheets, painted it onto the whip handles when no eyes watched. In the pantry, she switched the jugs, water for washing, oil for bed slats. No one saw, no one suspected, and yet everything had already begun to die. The summons came on a Wednesday. Hannah heard it before it was spoken. The bell above the front corridor, the slow tread of Rowland's boots across the gallery floor. She had prepared for this hour. Her hands moved without tremor as she folded linens. The poison-laced comb nestled against her scalp. A white apron wrapped across her front. Starch still crisp from morning steam. She moved as the others did, head bowed, eyes down, but her silence was not submission. It was pressure, a depth, the kind that deepens water until it drowns. The household had swelled with guests. Overseers from neighboring plantations had come to drink Rowland's brandy and measure his harvest against theirs. There were 5 in total, counting the 2 who rode in at dusk, men thick with sweat and iron, men who never called Hannah by name. To them she was gal, or worse. That night they would die without ever knowing her face. Rowland summoned her to the master bedroom after supper. She passed through the hall slowly, brushing her fingers across the doorframe, coated just hours before in a tincture that no overseer would detect, not until their throats tightened. She paused at the bedpost, adjusted the linens. She knew the route they would take. She knew the sweat they would wipe from their brows before sleep. The polished bed frame gleamed faintly in the lamplight. Tainted oil soaked into every crevice. One by one, the men retired. One by one, they stepped into the trap. Rowland himself was first to falter. Around midnight, Hannah heard the groan, not loud, not alarming, just a noise like a man with stomach fire. But she did not go to him. She waited in the corridor, eyes fixed on the floor. A candle trembled on the bureau, casting warped shadows along the wall. Then came the overseers. Jameson, the eldest, staggered from his cot with sweat streaming down his neck. His boots slipped on the floorboards. The sheets had poisoned him. He had wiped his face with cloth dipped in tainted water. He made it as far as the hall before his knees gave way. No cry, just the thud of flesh meeting wood. The second man, Barrow, died with his hand still clutching the door handle. His skin turned gray before he fell. The handle bore Hannah's mixture, faint like old oil but fatal to open flesh. He dropped like spoiled meat, his whip falling beside him. The whip handle, too, had been painted with the tincture. Inside the master room, Rowland began to convulse. The lamp beside his bed clattered to the floor, striking the rug but not breaking. He choked once, a dry heave that scraped the back of his throat. Hannah stood outside the door. She did not enter. She listened. By morning, the house was a chamber of sickness. For more overseers tried to rouse the master. They move him, touch the linens, press fingers to his damp neck. 2 collapsed by the bedside, 1 foaming. The 3rd made it halfway down the staircase before his legs gave out. By mid-morning, silence overtook the house, a silence heavier than any sermon. And then came panic. The youngest of the overseers, barely a man, face still smooth, ran to the stables. Another followed him. They believed the master had been cursed. They believed flight would save them. They never noticed the saddle girths Hannah had sliced in hours before. Beneath the cloak of dawn, the horses bucked beneath them at the edge of the field, throwing both men into the muddy rice pond where the water never stayed still. Their bodies were found days later, bellies swollen, mouths open to the sky. Within hours, the Rowland estate was quiet as a graveyard. Not one bullet fired, not one torch raised. Only the scent of bitter sap and bloodless death. 11 men, brought down not by rebellion, but by a woman who never raised her voice. Hannah moved through the halls like fog. She did not run. She did not shout. She unlatched the pantry doors, revealing the trail she had prepared behind the supply crates, an old servant's path that led through the marsh and into the salt forest beyond. No orders given. No speeches. She simply stood by the storeroom with the keys in her hand. And the others came. One by one, the enslaved filed in. Men, women, children, all eyes, no mouths. They looked at her not with fear, but with something older, reverence, memory. She said only one thing. There's a way. And then she stepped aside. They came barefoot, not out of haste, but because no one wanted the soil to forget their steps. The youngest held tight to the hips of older siblings. The elders walked slow, dignified, with cloth-wrapped bundles pressed at their chests, bits of salt meat, flint, names stitched into rags. Hannah did not lead them. She walked beside them, her face turned toward the trees. The trail was older than Rowland blood. It had been carved by footsteps long vanished, runaways who never made it, whose bones lay hidden beneath wild ginger and palmetto. Hannah had found it seasons ago, when the scent of freedom lingered like sweat after labor. She had walked it alone then, touching each branch, each turn, until it no longer felt like hiding but returning. They passed a split pine that bent like a bowed head, then the rusted chain nailed to a stump, a relic no one dare remove. Beyond that, the marsh opened like breath. The salt air was sharp here, mixed with the stink of brine and decay. But it carried no overseers, no commands, no names barking hunger. The forest grew strange as close to the water. Trees bent sideways, moss swaying like hair. Crickets sang, and frogs bellowed beneath the reeds. But there were no dogs, no hooves, no torches. Not yet. Ahead, the path forked into 3. Hannah chose the middle, narrow, thorn-lined, overlooked. It wound toward what had once been an old shipyard, abandoned when the river changed its course and choked the inlet with mud. There, broken ribs of old boats jutted from the soil like carcasses. It was a place where it would have been shaped into escape, then forgotten. The group moved like mist among the husks. Children climbed the slanted decks of rotting schooners. Mothers lay on salt-wet canvas and breathed for the first time without fear. The men gathered tools, broken harpoons, loose planks, coils of rope that had not yet turned to dust. It was not safety, but it was a pause. And a pause is all the hunted ever need to become something else. But the hunters came. Rowland's cousin, a man named Beck, had returned from Georgetown that morning to find the house stinking of oil and silence. He raised the alarm, loosed the dogs, and called in 4 mounted patrolmen from the next estate. They came with muskets and gnarled ropes, expecting battle. But they found only death, mouths open, bodies cold, the smell of oleander still clinging to the bedsheets. They knew who. They just didn't know where. The dogs were good. Bloodhounds trained to follow even the faintest sweat. But when they hit the trail behind pantry, their noses buckled. Hannah had known they would come. She had spent weeks gathering ash from the hearth and pepper from the spice stores. That morning, before unlocking the door, she had scattered the mix across the trail. Fine, invisible, potent. The dogs gagged, wheezed, stumbled sideways. One collapsed. The hunters cursed and beat the brush with the butts of their rifles. They split into three, following the forks, 2 to the left, 1 to the right. Only Beck went straight, the path Hannah had chosen. The forest did not echo here. Sound absorbed into the wet, into bark, into history. The group at the shipyard heard them coming only by the way the frogs fell silent. Hannah did not speak. She moved. A rope was pulled across the path between 2 wreck hulls. A trap laid with slats just firm enough to hold a rabbit, just rotten enough to collapse under weight. The first man fell with a crack, his boot bursting through. The plank gave way and his scream was short. A spike lay buried in the mud below, once part of keel, now sharpened, now red. The second hunter raised his rifle. But Isaiah, a boy of 15, once too slow for the fields, swung a harpoon. It wasn't thrown. It was guided. The man's head snapped back, and he dropped into the reeds without a word. Beck never fired a shot. He saw the boy, saw the rope, saw the eyes staring from behind driftwood and vine, not afraid, but watching. He turned and ran. By dusk, the marsh belonged to silence again. In the distance, flames licked the edge of the trees. The Rowland house had caught fire. A lamp overturned when one of the overseers staggered in death. The flames found curtains and timbers. It did not scream. It burned slow, like memory turning into ash. From the shipyard's edge, Hannah watched the sky glow orange. She did not smile. She did not cry. She reached into her apron and pulled free the last thing she had taken from the house, a length of rusted keyring. Still warm from her pocket, she dropped it into the mud, watched it sink. Around her, the others gathered. Some stared at the fire. Some turned away. But none moved until Hannah did. She stepped to the old wharf, where boats had once launched into open water. There, beneath canvas and time, lay a skiff, cracked, water-warped but afloat, for it could fit 5 if they didn't breathe too hard. Isaiah stepped forward. Ruth and her infant followed. Then an elder woman with no name, who had not spoken in 3 years, placed her hand on the edge of the hull. The rest turned inland, into the trees, toward other roads, other stories. Hannah stepped into the boat last. The marsh opened before them, and they rowed. The river widened beneath them. Mud turned to water. Trees bowed back into shadow. The stars above, smeared across the sky like salt on bruises, blinked without witness. Hannah kept her hands on the oars, her arms steady, the current beneath her humming like a voice too deep to name. The skiff drifted low, its sides near splintering. With each stroke, water lapped against rot. But it held. Behind them, a low orange glow still hovered, the Rowland house consumed, timber by timber, window by window, a fire with no survivors and no mercy. One spark had caught the rug. The rug met the drapes. The drapes whispered at the walls. The house that once held names and blood and ledgers turned inward upon itself. No screams came from it, only collapse. 11 men gone, not by blade nor by bullet, but by silence. Not one call for war, no trumpet of rebellion, just oil, breath, sap, and memory. The paper would later call it illness, a fever, a curse. The doctors would not agree. No cause could be named, only the dead named each other, and all pointed to one woman who did not remain. By morning, the skiff scraped against marshstone near the mouth of the estuary. They had reached the edge of the St. Helena inlets, where salt water meets forest, and the trees hang low with Spanish moss like morning veils. There was no one waiting, no flag, no hymn, just quiet. They dragged the boat ashore. Isaiah fell to his knees. Ruth fed the baby water from a hollow gourd. The elder woman, whose name none of them knew, touched the earth as if to thank it. Hannah stood. She turned her face toward the mainland, where the flames had faded. Her dress clung to her body, soaked through with sweat and marsh water, stained dark at the hem. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from the absence of burden. The keys were gone. The house was gone. The master's name gone. She walked into the treeline. There, beneath a canopy of cypress and oak, she began to gather planks, rope, canvas stripped from the skiff. A cracked lantern, still faintly warm. She found a stone sharp enough to cut and a hollow stump dry enough to shelter fire. She did not speak. She built a shelter first, crude, angled, barely wide enough for sleep. Then a second, and a pit to boil water. Others followed. By dusk, 7 shelters stood. Smoke curled from a single pot. Fish hissed against wood. A baby cried and was soothed. Names were not yet given. It was not yet a village. But it was not slavery. 2 more came that night, a man and a girl, both bloodied, from another plantation. They had seen the fire, heard the dogs vanish into the trees, and not return. The word had spread already. She walked through the house. The man said. She never opened her mouth. They say she stitched the poison in her hair, whispered the girl. Isaiah did not correct him. He only said, her name is Hannah, but Hannah said nothing. She took the child's hand, placed a warm cloth against her cheek, and pointed to the pot. Days passed, then weeks. They lived on what the marsh gave, trapped eels in shallow pools, boiled moss into tea, gathered crab, dried meat. No one ventured back. They knew better. The world they left behind would be searching, blaming, rebuilding lies. But the marsh held them, and the memory of the night spread faster than smoke. In fields still bound by chains, whispers moved. Not of fire, not of violence, but of silence. A silence that killed. Overseers flinched at combs. Masters grew wary of oiled doorframes. Even the cruelest began to hesitate, not out of guilt, but out of fear. They called her the Silent One. She dipped his sheets in death. She fed him justice to the handle of his own whip. She cut the saddles and watched them drown. No songs were written, no testimonies taken, only fragments passed from mouth to mouth, field to field, state to state. In one tale, she disappeared into the water, never touching land again. In another, she lived still, deep in the swamp, with eyes like smoke and a voice that can call death. The Roland name did not survive. His brother died months later, yellow fever, they said. His heirs sold the land. The house was never rebuilt. Nothing grew right thereafter. Animals refused a birth. Crops twisted. It became known as the still place. They say the soil remembers. In the marsh, the shelters became walls. The walls became cabins. A clearing opened, then paths. A child born that was named Quiet. One spring, a man with a Bible came to preach. Hannah sat by the edge of the water. When he asked for the name of the community, she said nothing, only took the comb from her hair, the same one, clean but not forgotten, and broken too. One half she buried. The other she placed at the preacher's feet. He did not ask again. The name they carved on the wooden sign was not a word. It was a symbol, half circle, broken comb, line. To the world, it meant nothing. But to those who came, those who hid, who healed, who remembered, it meant. This place began in silence. Years later, soldiers from the north stumbled on the village. They found a people armed with tools, not weapons, with herbs, not laws. They asked who was in charge. They were told, no one owns. They asked for names. They were told, we left behind. They asked where the leader was. A boy pointed to the trees. She watching. But no one pointed to a house. No monument stood. No statue. Only a burned ring of iron buried at the edge of the marsh. And inside it, ash fine black, fragrant still. The soldiers did not understand. They left, and still the stories came. Not of rebellion, not of war, but of a woman who remembered every poison, who watched the master sweat and did not wipe his brow, who painted death into linens and oil, who let fire speak instead of her mouth, a woman who never screamed, who let silence speak, who let silence kill. October 3rd, 1901, Edisto Island, South Carolina. The marsh was quiet now. No dogs, no whips, only wind and reeds, moving slow like old hands across cloth. The war was long over. The names were different, the houses rebuilt. But beneath the pine needles and soft black mud, the memory still breathed. A man named Elijah Morse, dressed in state boots and an officer's hat from the war in '98, came at Edisto with a letter in his coat and a scar beneath his collar. The letter was from Washington. The scar was from before. He had heard the stories, from his grandmother, from a dying preacher, from a woman on a train who spoke as if conjuring ghosts. He followed maps that no longer matched the earth, rode ox carts down forgotten roads, paid an old gullah fisherman 2 silver coins to lead him through the inlets. They called the place Half Comb. No official chart marked it. No postal rider reached it. But it was there, beneath cypress shade, among cabins woven from rot and resilience. The roofs were patched with bark and tin. Smoke rose soft from the chimneys. Children played near water's edge, their laughter like the songs the enslaved once hummed to the stars. Elijah walked through without drawing eyes. He was brown-skinned like them, tall like his mother. The wind carried his scent, tobacco, ink, powder, but not fear. He carried no rifle, no orders, only a folded paper and a name, Hannah Green. He found her where they said he would, not in a throne, not in a chapel, in the shade of a collapsed schooner, seated on a bench carved from salt-bleached oak. Her hair was gray, pulled back with a strip of linen. Her fingers were wrapped in cloth, stained from herbs. Her eyes had not dimmed. They looked at Elijah like mirrors that remembered everything he had not yet done. "You come for a name," she said. He said nothing, just offered the letter. She didn't touch it. "You want truth to sit on paper?" He looked down. "They want to record survivors. For the record, the Freedmen's Bureau, veterans, founders." They asked if I knew of a Hannah Green. Her mouth twitched, not a smile. Something heavier. They asked now. "It's been decades." "No." Her voice low, brittle. "It's been silence." She stood slowly, her body a map of aches and time. Every step she took cracked softly, not bone but burden. She led him toward the water. The sun was low, turning the river to blood and gold. "There," she pointed. "That's where the boat touched. First time." Elijah followed her hand. "You were a child?" "No." She paused. "I was the ending of something." She knelt near the water and dipped her hands into it. Let the mud curl around her fingers. Too many still ask what we built here. They never ask what we lost to build it. "I'm asking." She looked at him. "You were born free?" "I was." "My mother," she wasn't. She said your name like a prayer. Hannah nodded once, slowly. "That's enough. Do you want the world to know?" She picked up a stone and tossed it. It skipped once, sank. "They already do." "Then why not let it be written?" "Because they'd write it wrong." A wind rose then, brushing through reeds, lifting the edge of Elijah's coat. She stared across the marsh like someone seeing through time. "I didn't kill them with hate. I killed them with memory." Elijah took the letter, crumpled it softly, and placed it in the river. It floated for a moment, paper against tide, then sank. "Tell your mother," Hannah said, turning back, "that I didn't scream." "I know," he said. She stopped. "That's why I waited for you." That night, Elijah slept near the fire, the stars thick above. No one asked why he had come. No one asked what he'd do. He left before sunrise, and the village remained. No monument marked the place. No flag rose. But beneath a tree carved with rings, each notch a name remembered, a small comb was buried, its teeth broken, its story whole.